Now we're ready to look at some of the architecture and artifacts that have been recovered from Hazor. First, in the lower city, direct your attention to region C. Some of the things that were recovered here include infants that were buried in jars. These correspond to Middle Bronze II. A more modest-sized temple compared with some other temples at Hazor. Workshops indicating pottery activity. In a moment you'll see a picture of a cult standard that is silver on bronze, dating to the 14th and 13th centuries. And then a structure known as the Stela Temple. In a moment you'll see why. A basalt statue of a steated figure, and you'll notice a crack at the neck zone where it's been reassembled. Archaeologists are convinced that that was not accidental, but an intentional mutilation. And finally, a pottery mask. From the Stela Temple, a fascinating sculpture on the left, a stela with a bas-relief of hands, and this posture would indicate prayer. And notice the disc that's surrounded by kind of horns or a crescent, and that is depicting the moon, probably the god whose name is known as Sin, S-I-N. That's the moon god. And then to the right, the bronze cult standard that's been plated over with silver. Look to be several serpent figures there. I'm not sure the dimension of the cult standard. These pictures were seized independently, so in a moment you'll see the relative size of the stela, but please do not infer that the standard is the same size. All right, here you see several stela, and this has come to be known as the Stela Temple. One of the reasons for including this shot is you see an archaeologist on the left, and you get a relative sense of the size of these stela. It's possible that maybe Yigael Yadin, who's brushing off the pottery. I'm not positive the identity of the archaeologist. Notice also the figure, the basalt seated figure that's at the left end of the series of stela. If you study the chest, you'll notice that there is an incised circular pattern. We'll return to that a little bit later. That seems to be the emblem of the storm god Baal or Hadad, two names for the same deity, as I understand it. Now you see that figure a little more clearly on the left, and then enlargement on the right. This is basalt. Notice the crack line at the neck. Intentional mutilation. Makes you think of the God's instruction that the Israelites were to have nothing to do with Canaanite religion, but instead were to wipe it out. And that is at the stratum 1A. They're in area C, and that's this destruction is shortly before 1200, which could well correspond to the moving in of the Israelites led by Joshua. And here is a pottery mask also from area C. So you can see it dates to the 14th or 13th era. Now direct your attention to area F. We have just one item to point out, an architectural feature. The symmetry of this particular structure has led archaeologists to propose that perhaps it is a temple, in fact a double temple, and yet they're not sure. It's possible that it was a palace. And they also found drainage tunnels. And you see those in the figure on the left. And now we come to Area H. This is still in the lower city, far to the northwest. There's a very significant temple. There are 3 chambers to it, and this is the innermost. So it's been nicknamed the Holy of Holies. Not that we found anything inscriptional that said that's what it should be called, but simply recognizing both from the Israelite temple and from other temples in the ancient world that seem to have an inner sanctum. Sharon Zuckerman calls this the orthostat temple. And the reason for that, an orthostat is a shaped piece of stone as opposed to field stone. Field stone are unshaped, and you see most what kind of look like rubble, but clearly they have been intentionally placed in the outer wall. In contrast to that, if you look at the room, this chamber, and then notice particularly on the wall that's nearest to you, you see some slabs that are vertical. Then follow it around to the right, and you see the slabs continue. There's a lot of shadow. You don't see them as clearly. Follow it around to the left, and there are 3 slabs that stand up, some fashion stones that are lying down, and perhaps those used to be standing up. I'm not positive about that. And then now that you've got the scheme, look to the back wall, and straight back you see some of these slabs. They are not fully rectangular. Looks like they've been chipped off, but they have been set up, and you can tell from this that they don't go all the way to the floor, but start, it's difficult to tell dimension, perhaps that's 3 feet up, and then come these slabs. You see them on the left there, the far left and right. So basically the entire area was rimmed with these. They're known as orthostats. You might be thinking, why are these not called ashlars? Ashlars are structural, as in building a large vertical wall. Ashlars are as deep as they are high. In contrast, orthostats are thinner, so we call them slabs. They have a nice smooth face, but looks like they're a little bit rough on the backside, and they're thinner. So they're slabs that are set up on edge. Now let's examine more closely some of the features we see in the orthostat temple, both the Holy of Holies and then the chambers overall. Probably most helpful for orientation is the lower left, and there you see the 3 zones. They are marked by letters with kind of a tan background. So H-H, that's the Holy of Holies, and that's what's depicted in the upper right. That's the photograph. Then the center zone is marked with a C, and that's known as the court. And then the letter P indicates porch, or kind of an entry area. Orient yourself with the black and white photo that's in the upper left, and you can begin to kind of transfer these images. So once again, they're in the black and white photo. The HH, Holy of Holies, is that rectangle. It includes the green rectangle as well as the cyan circles. And then the court is the middle portion. It includes the red circle and then the oblong rectangle with the to the bottom of that rectangle are a couple of smaller lateral parallel rectangles. The porch then is to the right. The tan colored circles are part of that. And now turn your attention to the text there on the right. The cyan circles draw our attention to 2 basalt roof support column bases. So imagine some piers that would be going up. These are not ornamental, but these are structural to hold a roof. If you look at the black and white photo, you can kind of see those, but they're most clear in the color photo. Still within that Holy of Holies, notice the green rectangle. Especially on the color photograph, you can see that the wall, the left wall, kind of dents in, and there's a recessed area. So there's a niche here. It's a little hard to make that out in the black and white photo. On the black and white sketch, you can see the green rectangle there. Incidentally, can you appreciate on the lower left, the Holy of Holies has a border of very heavy black lines. This is depicting the orthostats. Not only are they in the Holy of Holies, but you'll see that they also border the porch. Next, turn your attention to the red circles. As I was studying out the information, I believe that this is what they intend when they refer to a bama, which is a high place. It would be an altar. It's a very distinct stone. And then the last two items that are itemized in the text do not appear in the color photo. What we have instead is right by that bama, you may be able to detect that there's a cut zone. So this is a walkway from the center region, that would be the court, leading into the Holy of Holies. But if we were to cross from the court to the right, and you can see this in the black and white photo and also in the pen sketch, there would be on either side of the entry into the porch, there would have been some pillars, twin pillars. In this case, unlike the basalt columns that are in the Holy of Holies, these are not in the middle of the room, but rather they flank the entryway into the court. So these are more symbolic or artistic, and archaeologists point out that Solomon's temple had two pillars just outside the gateway into the temple proper. In fact, they were named. They were so prominent. So this is reminiscent of that sense of valuing enormous pillars that would mark the entryway. Finally, in the pen sketch, the plan on the lower left, you'll see a green oval. We're told that there was a potter's kiln in roughly that location. You can see the green oval there to the lower right of the black and white photo as well. And evidently this was to produce votive containers, various vessels, particularly small ones then, which would be used for ceremonies. Near the bama was found a lot of some intact pottery and then some broken pottery as well. So this was a site whose cultic activities required a pretty good supply of pottery vessels. This is coming from a PhD dissertation that I found online. And I trust that as you notice the twin black dots that are in the center, you'll recognize the center of the upper rooms. You'll recognize this as 4 patterns, chronological development of the temple, this orthostat temple. And what interested me, I was trying to discern where was that potter's kiln. And in this dissertation, they pointed out that it was just below, south of room 2146. So that's how we have a general sense of where that's located. Something else that they discovered, in addition to various figurines and pottery vessels and so forth, were some clay models of livers, and these would be animal livers, like typically it would be sheep. This probably is a process or a practice that you may not be familiar with. Divination was the ability to predict future, was part of the role of the priests of these cults. And one of the ways that they claimed to be able to do it was there would be a sacrificial animal, so a sheep would be sacrificed, and then they would open up the entrails and extract the liver. Based on the shape of the liver and perhaps some markings on it, that would be their code for giving an omen, or giving an oracle rather, of what was to come. As you study the broken piece in the lower left, you'll see some scratches and markings. Those appear to be cuneiform. So this is basically, think of it as, if it were for healing, if it were for a physician, it would be telling a doctor in training what to look for on a given organ. Instead, this is to instruct priests. So when they would compare an actual liver, they would be able to say, oh, I see it's this pattern. I suppose if you want a more commonplace analogy, if you could imagine a book being published with patterns of tea leaves. So here you have your reference manual, and then you look at somebody's tea, and you would consequently propose a prediction based on the arrangement of the tea leaves. As you may recall, God forbade his people from trusting in such things. He's certainly the God who tells the future, but he does not disclose that or communicate that through the liver of an animal like a sheep. You'll see in the description the word extispicy, and that's what this process is called. The yellow X indicates where they found those. It was to the right of the bama, that altar piece. We're showing this picture again just to give you a sense of the various elements that were recovered here. One piece I didn't comment on earlier has to do with the column that you see just to the left of the far pillar base. So there's a vertical column. This is an incense altar, and we'll show a picture of that a little bit later. In fact, here is that basalt incense altar. Notice the symbol, the circular symbol with a cross in the middle of it. Do you recall that seated basalt figure on whose chest that you could tell there was a little bit of a circle that was etched in? You could see the upper part of it. This is the symbol for the main god of Hazor, known as Hadad or Baal. Also found within this Area H temple were various bowls of pottery and this beautiful basalt bowl. Can you imagine chiseling that out of solid stone? And it has this kind of a spiral, or it almost looks like cascading waves, doesn't it? Finally, notice the orthostat, which is in the foreground, and it has a bas-relief of a lion. We're told this appeared to be intentionally buried here, and they say it's at the entry point to the temple. So my guess is that it would be located, it was located where you see the tan box with the X. So that would be approaching the porch before you get to the court or the Holy of Holies. Also found in Sector H was this basalt figure. The archaeologists propose it's either a decapitated king or deity. My vote, given that it's in a temple precinct, is probably it was a deity. When they found it, it was in fragments. If you look closely, it appears that there is a crack there just at the upper chest or the lower neck area. I believe we're seeing a reassembled seam there. So this may be evidence once again of a people's coming in who are under instruction to destroy the worship of false gods, lest they would absorb it, admire it, and think that this is the way to get ahead in this new territory. As you know from the story of the Israelites, unfortunately, syncretism did affect their worship. Otherwise, we would not have prophets who come and tell them to clear out the false gods. This is a beautiful bronze plaque of a Canaanite nobleman that was found in Sector H.